Welcome back to the War Room, my beautiful people and fight fans from all around the world. I am your fight goddess, Chris Bowler. I'm here with my boxing family, Melissa Smith, women's boxing historian, and my boy, Eddie Goldman. He is the conscious of combat sports. And today, it's been a busy little week. It's been some crazy shit happening. But today, we're going to cover the heavyweights because Ruiz and Ortiz are fighting come Labor Day weekend. But Teddy Atlas is making some noise because corruption in the boxing industry by itself, just the boxing community by itself, we've got decades long history about corruption, but it has come to, I think, what would you guys agree? This is like a next level corruption we're talking about. Melissa, you brought this article to our attention from Sports Illustrated. Let's kick it off with you. Tell us why Teddy Atlas blew his top this weekend about corruption in boxing.
Well, actually, it wasn't Sports Illustrated. It was
SI Line. Staten Island. I'm sorry.
And that's because Teddy Atlas is actually from Staten Island.
Staten Island Line.
So it's New York. So it's a New York story. He's a New York guy, and as he put it. And I'll quote him here. It's like, oh my goodness, really? There's corruption in boxing? What? It's, it's part of the business we're in. Yeah, but it's not the business I choose. It's a business that has been mutilated and morphed. And this comes out of a recent story where public documents show that third-party lobbyists, quote unquote, were receiving payments for rankings related to the WBA, meaning that there were, corrupt practices within WBA that was influencing how boxers are ranked. And, that has an enormous implication for the monies that boxers receive, the types of fights that they have. It has all sorts of long-standing tentacles into illegal sports betting, promotional deals, and everything else. And the fact that
but how does a fighter get ranked? I mean, is it based on points? How does anyone know if it's corrupted?
Each sanctioning body has their own manner of doing it.
Okay.
Now, some sanctioning bodies have 20, 30, 40 people that are voting individually on how to rank a fighter. In some, for instance, in women's boxing, I sit on the Ring Magazine sanctioning, not a sanctioning body, but the rankings committee, and we have very spirited debates. And then basically it's by voice vote, seeing how many are saying, hey, it should go in one direction or another, whether somebody's number one, number two, or number three. I mean, some of it is in the eye of the beholder. That's always the case with boxing. But if you have someone who is corrupt and getting payments for saying, no, my guy is number one, that's corruption. And that has really huge effects on the sport downstream. And if you have an entire sanctioning body that is being called out for that kind of corruption, we're really in trouble. Now, what Teddy Atlas has called for is something that we have discussed on this show many times, which is he has called for a National Boxing Commission with a commissioner, something along the lines of a national commission that John McCain had proffered in the Senate all those years ago and wrote a beautiful bill about. But really, we're at a much larger point here because boxing, like many other sports, is international in scope. And corruption is international in scope. And really, we're looking at something that I'm gonna kick the ball to Eddie on this notion of really what is sports government all about, and having larger international sports governance with teeth that can cross borders, that can not only set policy and rules, but also has the teeth to be able to go after corruption by working with national government policing organizations, like the FBI or the government, or just look at the organizations that have come together to go after the Kinahans. But having that kind of an arm to be able to set policy and so on. So I'm going to kick it to you, Eddie, to talk about play the game and what's being proposed for an international sports government.
Yeah, thanks. I'm reminded of an old line from, you remember the old great soap opera Dallas with Larry Hagman, where he played the evil guy we all loved, J.R. Ewing, where he said with a smile one time, ask the right questions and you get the right answers. And this is the case with this in boxing. If you can start up by saying, we need a national boxing commission, that's the wrong question and the wrong answer, because you're dealing with an international sport and you're also dealing with a US government that would be very tenuous at best to try to regulate boxing. Who knows what different administrations would have had with the National Boxing Commission. And when they passed the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act in 2000, they really didn't put much enforcement other than the Department of Commerce would look into things, and nothing was ever done. And that was on purpose because the promoters vehemently oppose any type of outside regulation. This crazy patchwork of sanctioning bodies and state and provincial and tribal commissions in North America regulating the sport and all this nonsense that against these international promoters is there for a purpose, because it isn't real regulation, which leads to the obvious question and answer that you're dealing with an international sport that is part of world sport, and the answers are only going to be found by looking at this internationally and looking at boxing as part of world sport, because this type of corruption we're talking about exists in most, if not all, other sports, both Olympic and professional, anything that's out there. And very often the American media in particular is very myopic. I view them as sort of, there was an interesting debate among the clods who follow MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They actually had a real debate about whether the earth is flat. This is a real debate they had on the racist Joe Rogan's show. Well, we can, laugh and shake our heads at that, rightly so. But in boxing, that's kind of the view, particularly of the American boxing media. Everything ends outside the borders of the lower 48, or maybe you can include Canada and Puerto Rico too. And if you go beyond that, you fall off the edge of the earth. The fact is, these questions have been discussed internationally for a number of years, not just with international boxing. Corruption in international boxing has been discussed on the Olympic and professional level for many, many years, but in all sports. And what I found, particularly in American media and journalists, there are only a handful of people, including academics and people that say they're for sport reform, who follow what's going on internationally. I'll just give one example. There's a conference that's been held for about 20 some years, Play the Game. That's an international conference that brings together people from all sorts of walks of life in sports, journalists, sports officials, some athletes, academics, all sorts of different people to discuss how to reform sport. And it's little known in the United States because of this myopic view. It's so little known that I was lobbying for them to do a satellite conference in the United States. They did one a couple of years ago in Colorado, but I actually wanted them to do it in a major city, particularly New York, which would be great for us. And I contacted the person who was then head of the Columbia School of Journalism, who also taught the sports journalism class. And so he had some knowledge and expertise in sports journalism. And I said, I think it would be good if Play the Game would hold a conference at Columbia in New York. And he said, what's Play the Game? This is, not just somebody you just meet in a bar or something. The head of the Columbia Journalism School and who taught sports journalism. This is typical of this. Play the Game has been discussing this for this issue for decades. And the idea of setting up a world anti-corruption agency in specific for at least 15 years. At the recent conference, and you could go to playthegame.org, and there's like a ton of articles and videos. Jens Weinreich, the German journalist who's been dealing with corruption in the international movement for many years, documented how he raised this about 15 years ago. And I know I've discussed this with Jens Sire Anderson, who's the international director of Play the Game. But this has really started to come to a head. And there was some incredible proposals and discussions at the recent conference. And there's been a proposal for whatever you're going to call it, a World Anti-Corruption Agency, an independent sports integrity body. You know, the name really isn't that important. It's basically setting up an international agency similar to WAAR, the World Anti-Doping Agency, but to deal with corruption in general in world sport. And one of the speakers at this conference, Viola von Kramon-Taubadal, who's a German member of the European Parliament for the Green Party. And I should just point out, if you're familiar with the American Green Party, the Green Party in Germany and in most of Europe is very different from the American Green Party of Jill Stein and people like that. I won't go too far into the politics, but the Green Party is actually in the government in coalition led by the SPD, the Social Democrats in Germany. And her statement was that in a couple of months, the Green Party in the European Parliament is going to actually put out a specific proposal to create this World Anti-Corruption Agency that would deal with all different types of sports. And she said a number of things that would really apply to boxing, wrestling, MMA, any sport you can name, football, baseball, basketball. She said, we have a problem with integrity in international sports. And this has not just been known yesterday, it's becoming worse. And we need something to fix this market failure. What we have seen in the last few years is a market failure. This is because sport regulates itself. This is the point. Boxing and all these other sports cannot properly regulate themselves. And she said they're going to publish this presentation very soon. And there were a number of other people talked about this, and they also talked about the rise of illegal betting. And I think we're going to start to see with legal betting more and more scandals come out as you watch these sports. This is also discussed in another, they had another session where you had a comment from Akash Maharaj of the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport, called for a UN special rapporteur on sport. That's someone that reports on this, to try to bring the United Nations in this. And he talked about how the Swiss government, where a lot of these international federations are based, the government is not interested in taking a hard line with these institutions for fear it will drive them to other jurisdictions. And I think on a national level, you could say the same thing about the United States, that you're not going to see the United States government seriously take up. They certainly have had a long time to deal with boxing. They haven't done it. And the reasons they haven't done it is they don't care. And they're both the Democrats and the Republicans are influenced by supporters among the boxing promoters and have direct ties to them. And if you look at all the problems that exist in boxing, all the key examples of corruption, we've talked a lot about Daniel Kinahan of Ireland, who based his operation in Spain, is now holed up in Dubai with his corruption and his tentacles existing in many places. Now you got the point where Tyson Fury, the WBC heavyweight champion, or virtually everybody views him as the #1 heavyweight, is not allowed to travel to the United States because of his ties to Kinahan. The WBA, for the moment anyway, even though it was the oldest sanctioning body in boxing, started in the United States, is now based in Panama. They say they're going to move to Houston, Texas. Now that's interesting to pick Texas, where you're not going to have particularly good regulation going on in that state of boxing. And the WBC, the largest sanctioning body, is based in Mexico. They're not going anywhere. WBO is based in Puerto Rico. IBF, which is the only one that really had some action taken against them a number of years ago, is based in the United States. And internationally, we've talked about Olympic boxing, the IBA, formerly AIBA. We've talked about Umar Kremlev of Russia and the fact in the fixed election that they had. So where they kept out the head of the Dutch Boxing Federation. Now they say they're going to have another election in a couple of months. But they're not going to have an election or re-election so far anyway for their board of directors, where they kept out several other leaders from various Olympic boxing federations from around the world who were running for their board of directors. This is all international, and it can't be dealt with. Not only can it not be dealt with nationally, but it's been shown it can't be dealt with just as a boxing only problem. The issue of FIFA, the corruption that was going on there, was dealt with because the number one, the international media, the people who are not bought off by these sports organizations, the independent sports media, exposed the corruption that was going on. But in the US, the FBI went after them. Why? Because football, which the U.S. calls its own name soccer, is not that big of a sport, and they can go after it. It's starting to grow, but when they went after it, it really wasn't that big. It wasn't one of the big four sports. You don't see the FBI going after NFL football, Major League Baseball, the NBA, National Hockey League, except in some minor examples. And one of the things also that was pointed out at Play the Game, this is not going to mainly target the athletes. This has been a problem in WADA with doping. Yeah, you catch individual athletes, but there was no framework to deal, for example, with the Russian state-sponsored doping program and state-sponsored doping programs in other countries, because all they were empowered to do was to test and catch individual athletes. And the problem, particularly in Russia, isn't the individual athletes. It isn't the 15-year-old figure skater from Russia. It was a whole systematic doping that's been going on, where the athletes are basically given a choice, assuming they even know what they're taking. You take this stuff or you don't compete. And that's the end of it. And it's a very difficult choice for them. So this has to be dealt with internationally, and it has to be dealt with as part of other sports. And one of the debates at the conference was, how do you involve law enforcement? Because you need some way to deal with this. And some of the people there, particularly some of the journalists and athletes representatives from Canada, pointed out, wait a minute, law enforcement has been part of the problem. In terms of particularly sexual abuse of athletes, law enforcement agencies have not only been less than eager to deal with these types of important issues, but also have been participants. Law enforcement members have been participants in it. So how you structure it, there's a lot of work to be done to figure out exactly how to do this, but you're going to start to see some movement on it.
Right.
And if we want to deal with this crap like phony ratings in boxing, I mean, 20 years ago, we had the Boxing Writers Rankings poll, which had an independent poll of boxing journalists to vote on. Yeah, and reasonable people can have, like Melissa said, can have differences on the rankings, but that's not how these sanctioning bodies work. And we had it for a few years, And then it just kind of faded away because it didn't get any support. Because even though that was an international group, it was mainly based in the United States, and it was mainly dealing in the boxing community. You got to go beyond this. And if you're interested in corruption in other combat sports, wrestling, MMA, any of these other sports that are out there, or sports in general, you really should look at some of these articles and the sessions. They're quite long, but sit down and watch the videos. And there was the proposal for independent sports integrity body
Right.
to be unveiled in September, and play the game may be the correct forum to develop a sports anti-corruption agency, are two of them. And I think
Why don't they
there's some
just,
more.
Eddie, why don't they just expand WADA? I mean, WADA's in everything. So why don't they just add an anti-corruption agency, fund them and give them the money to go after anybody and
Who's
everybody?
they? Who's they?
I'm just
Who's
saying, who funds WADA?
The sports, the IOC, various governments.
Right,
it's
so
a
then
combination
everybody
of
that wants to participate in any type of professional sports would have to pay WADA, right? Pay into WADA to be a part of the body of WADA, anti-corruption. And you agree that if you join this network or whatever you're fighting in or playing soccer in or football in, that you abide by these rules.
You can't, one of the points made was that you have to keep this World Anti-Corruption Agency separate from the sports organizations, and that involves.
But that makes no sense.
funding.
Why separate it? Why separate it?
Because the sports
if it's destroying the sporting community and the
it
professional
has
sports.
to be given jurisdiction over the sports organization.
So it's the kind
It
of
not
thing
be
where
part of it.
we'd have it as part of the UN or something like that, where, if it's going to be international, and if it's a third part, it's in essence a third party, in the same way that WADA is essentially a third party. I guess that's
right.
So some kind of third party organization, it has to be funded from somewhere. It has to have relationships at the highest level with different governments and governing bodies. And it has to have acceptance in that way. So the question is, how is it housed? How is it developed? And what are the teeth? And that's where, to me, the question of enforcement comes in. And, we have the recent success so far of going after Kinahan and the tentacles of his organization and starting to really squeeze that corruption. But whether that's possible across other sporting issues where the main actor may not end up being, a major drug dealer, doing billions of dollars of drug deals over decades, may not make it as sexy for individual governments to put the resources they have into putting together that kind of a coalition to finally go after that kind of a criminal and put the effort into making those actions in place.
Yeah, that agency should be able to report to law agencies what its
findings are,
whatever the jurisdiction is, right? Wherever they find the criminal activity, they can report to those law enforcement agencies.
Being able to make referrals or whatever
exactly.
else. But I think it's a great start. Certainly, we're not going to solve it today, but it's a good start to tease out what these questions are, and something I think we really will be continuing to look at over time.
Right.
Well, I'd also point out, in terms of governments, Kinahan is still in Dubai. Supposedly his assets have been frozen, but he has not been deported from Dubai.
Nope.
He's not been arrested. The net is closing around him, and something might be coming soon, but he's still out there.
Yeah, and his dad and the whole family. They've been catching a lot of other people, and Tyson Fury can't fly to the States, or his brother, but anyway,
yeah,
heavyweights.
I don't know whether his brother's issue is related to Tyson. I'm not sure. There's like confusing information, whether it's
Yeah.
that or
Well, it doesn't
something
matter.
else.
He can't come. He can't come
He
over
can't,
here.
he
So
can't
that's the
come
bottom
here.
line.
He's not
And,
fighting.
and not only
Right.
he can't come, Matthew Macklin can't come.
Right.
He was stopped. He was going to be an announcer for Sky Sports.
Yeah.
In an event in the U.S. They stopped him from coming. They stopped Ben Davidson, the boxing trainer who trains a number of fighters. And from what I read, they also stopped Coogan Cassius, who was the guy from the IFL TV, from coming. So
Right.
the U.S. is still the big money place for boxing. And Fury talked about how he loved Vegas and all of that and had a home there. It's not allowed there. And you look at where
I do not
the
have big
players-
tears.
No,
I don't
none.
have
Right,
big tears
the
here. I'm
players are
sorry.
changing. How the next major fight you're having coming up is the rematch of Alexander Usyk of Ukraine and Anthony Joshua of the UK is taking place in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And they have the TV rights for that. They still haven't officially announced what the TV deal is. And it's going to be in a relatively small venue. They just announced. We thought it would be in the Jeddah Superdome, but it's going to be in the King Abdullah Sports City Sports Hall, which I read only seats about 10,000. So it's interesting economics going on from this fight that is obviously going to be very huge. Probably now will be on Sky Sports box office pay-per-view in the UK, on DAZN pay-per-view elsewhere, but a month in, they haven't even announced it. You have many different players coming, and who's going to regulate this fight and the undercard fights of Usyk and Joshua in Saudi Arabia, where it's a monarchy, so it's not like the government has any type of independent bodies, where as bad as the athletic commissions are, say, in the United States, then they have some independence from the rest of the government. You don't have that in a monarchy. So you can have somebody who's part of the royal family regulating a fight that the royal family paid a lot of money for to bring over, and the royal family has a TV rights. This is the regulation that's going to go on for this fight. So that's where we're at with that. They might have some boxing commission. I don't know. It might be.
But as you discussed, when we talked about the fact that this fight was going there, Saudi Arabia has also staked a claim on wanting to develop clean sports, clean entertainment, and to become a hub for that. So it's in their interest to ensure that there is proper governance
clean,
of
right?
this fight. And if they don't, then what they stand to lose is what they're claiming their long-term objective is, which is to develop, industries beyond oil, of which entertainment is one of them, and sports entertainment becomes part of that larger umbrella. So that's also something that's going to be worth watching to see whether they put teeth behind that as an anti-corruption, stake a claim for anti-corruption right from the beginning of having these kinds of events in Jeddah as part of that new strategy to develop their longer term economic health. So interesting to watch.
Well, AJ is looking pretty good over there. I know that.
Yeah. So you went to something, right?
Oh yeah, I went
For
to the
heavyweights.
I attended the Luis Ortiz and Andy Ruiz. I mean Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz.
Luis
presser.
Ortiz. That's
Yeah,
September 4th, right?
September 4th, Labor Day weekend is going to happen at
Wow.
the Crypto Center, downtown Los Angeles. And,
Awesome.
Abner Mares is also going to fight on that card. He's coming back after 4 years. I wanted to ask him, why the hell, after 4 years, are you coming back? I mean,
money.
I wanted to say that, right.
Yeah,
but,
no,
that's great.
something.
And Andy looks like, I've known Andy since he was like 19. I met him when he was.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, when he was training at Wild Card, the fighter that I was conditioning at the time used to spar with Andy. I eventually started.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, they used to spar together. And that's how I knew Andy had really fast hands. He's just really quick with those hands. but he's trimmed down. He's solid now. You know, it's like he seems a lot more mature and calm. And I met his son, and it's like, oh wow, he's no longer that 19-year-old boy, right? He's a grown man, and he understands the gravity of this fight that he has with Ruiz, because you know, King Kong, he said he's been training hard for King Kong. He's been wanting to match up with him for a minute. So it's going to be a good fight. King Kong, I wanted to yell out, how old are you, King Kong?
He'll officially tell you what, 43 or something, but
yeah, but
wink,
it was a
wink,
good,
wink.
it was a good presser. It was calm. There was no drama, no pushing. And so, yeah, we got some good shots.
So it's real. And hopefully, you know, he's learned from his loss to Joshua. I mean, that, aside from just the embarrassment of it all, it was cost him a lot of money, you know.
But there's still so many questions with Andy Ruiz, because he's every time he comes in, he has a different trainer. He left Manny Robles. He split with Eddie Reynoso, even though he has nice words with him. He's not in that camp with Canelo anymore. He's bringing in another trainer from Mexico. And yeah, he's lost a lot of weight, but is he really disciplined? You know, he's had a long career of being undisciplined, and he also can have ring rust. He hasn't fought since May of 2021, when he fought the fated Chris Arreola, which is his first fight back after losing the rematch to Joshua. So how sharp is he going to be? But that's why I think they picked Luis King Kong Ortiz, because he's, you know, who knows how old he really is. I assume he does. But he did not look good in his last fight. He seems to be fading fast. When he fought Charles Martin, heavyweight, Martin knocked him down twice at the beginning of the fight. Now, eventually, King Kong caught up with him and stopped him a couple of rounds later. But to get knocked down by Charles Martin says, you know, you're really in trouble, and you're really fading. So that's why I think they picked Ortiz. They figure he's, you know,
he's for the picking.
Way past his expiration date. And they're putting this on pay-per-view on a Sunday night on Labor Day weekend. So,
yeah, I'm curious whether they're going to get the sales, right? Are they going to get the numbers? It's Fox.
Yeah, it's going to be on Fox. They'll probably sell out the crypto center.
They'll sell out the center. The question is, what will their pay-per-view really look like? But you know, I'm not so sure about that part. I mean, I don't know if I'd pay for it, but I'll see. Yeah, but I see no women on the card yet.
Of course, because it's a PBC card. Of course, there's no women on the card.
No women need apply.
No women need apply.
But it's also, you know, in the summer, and it's 2 weeks after the Usyk Joshua rematch, and about 2 weeks before Canelo and Golovkin did their third fight too. So a lot of people are going to be forking over a lot of money.
And 1 week before Clarissa Shields,
which is what
Marshall, that's
which is on Sky Sports,
Sky and ESPN in the United States. It'll be on ESPN streaming.
But they're fighting in the UK, right?
Yeah, they're selling out. I mean, they've done an amazing job on the O2. They've sold out the whole ring, and they're on track to have a sellout. And it's going to be an all-female card. It'll be on Sky Sports.
Wow, that's dope.
And then ESPN Plus here streaming. It's going to be awesome. It's all-female card. Great card.
Right on.
We can talk about that next time.
Next go round, we'll do a whole segment on women's boxing. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Anything else we want to cover before we wrap this up? No. All right.
Stay cool, people.
Stay cool.
It's getting hot out there.
And it's humid here, even in California. Okay, it's never humid, but it is.
It's never humid in the summer where you are. It's like dry, bone dry.
It's a little crazy over here. So you guys stay cool, stay hydrated, please. Drink a lot of water, stay masked up.
Yes, please. Even the president's got.
That's
COVID.
right. Even Biden has.
Even Biden's got COVID.
I think we should do a political show. Don't you guys think we should do a little politics? We should cover some politics. Cover that J6 hearing live so I can talk shit about.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, we should definitely do a watch party on that. Live tweeting. Oh my Lord, I can't wait. Like I'm getting my popcorn.
Okay.
I got everything.
Look, we gotta hurry up. We got like an hour before it starts, right? All right, people. So look, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Melissa, tell everybody where they can find you, baby.
Well, they can get me. Well, people, Twitter @GirlBoxingNow, Instagram @GirlBoxingNow, girlboxing.org for my website. Buy my book.
That's right.
Amazon, A History of Women's Boxing. I'm hoping to get a second one going soon. I'll tell you more later. Right. And that's it. Stay cool. Stay masked. Cool. Stay safe. Right.
Stay safe, people. All right, Eddie, tell the people where they can find you, my brother.
Yeah, on Twitter @NHB News, where we discuss a lot of politics and sports and all sorts of things as well. My website's eddiegoldman.com. You could subscribe to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. I recently put up an article, I Hate the Summer, which sums up a lot of my views and talks a little bit about my own history and throws in some music there as well. So you can check that all out. And remember, still wear your mask. The COVID pandemic is still here and the numbers are still growing. You don't want to get COVID.
That's right, people. Stay masked up. And listen, you guys can find me on Twitter @AngryAfroRadio because I am that Black angry woman right now. And on Instagram @FightGoddessFitness. All right, you guys, take care. Until next time, we'll see you. Peace, love, and push-ups. Boom.